Racist cops arrests black teenager, unaware his mother is a police captain. What would you do if the system that swore to protect you became your biggest enemy? What if one traffic stop, one careless moment, could change your entire life? And how would you feel if the person meant to serve justice was the one trampling on it? The night was quiet, almost too quiet. Marcus Williams, a 17-year-old black teen with a bright future, was driving home after a long day of basketball practice. His dreams were clear: to graduate high school, get a scholarship, and make his mother proud. But little did Marcus know that the biggest challenge of his life wasn't in a classroom or on a court. It was just a few minutes away, wrapped in the flashing red and blue lights approaching fast behind him. Why is he being pulled over? Had he done something wrong? His heart raced as he pulled his car to the side of the road. He hadn't been speeding. His taillights were working fine. He had obeyed every traffic rule. Yet here he was, staring in his rearview mirror as a police officer approached, hand already resting on his holster. Why was the officer gripping his weapon like that? Was he seen as a threat already without a word being exchanged? The officer, Officer Mitchell, was notorious in their small town. Whispers of his racial biases weren't just rumors. They were facts, carried from household to household. The older generation knew to avoid him, and the younger ones often bore the brunt of his unnecessary stops. License and registration, Officer Mitchell demanded, his voice cold, almost as if he were preparing for something darker. Marcus complied, his hands shaking. He reached for his wallet slowly, cautious of every movement. Why did he feel like he had to be so careful? Wasn't this just supposed to be routine? "What are you doing out this late?" the officer questioned, peering into the car with suspicion. "I'm just coming back from practice, sir," Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady, though inside he was terrified. But something was off. Officer Mitchell's gaze lingered too long. He stared at Marcus as if sizing him up, as if he was guilty of something simply for existing in that space. Why does it feel like Marcus is on trial already? Why isn't this officer just doing his job? "I need you to step out of the car," Officer Mitchell said. Marcus froze. Why? What had he done wrong? Why did this feel like more than just a traffic stop? "Is there a problem, officer?" Marcus asked, his voice wavering. "Step out of the car. Now." Marcus hesitated, but he knew he had no choice. He unbuckled his seatbelt slowly, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. As soon as his feet hit the pavement, Officer Mitchell grabbed his arm and slammed him against the side of the car. Why was this happening? Was this even legal? Did this officer really think Marcus was a criminal? The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into Marcus's wrists as he was shoved to the ground. His heart pounded in his chest. People were driving by, watching, but no one stopped. Why wasn't anyone helping? Why was everyone just looking away? "Why are you doing this?" Marcus pleaded, his voice cracking with fear. "You look like you're hiding something," the officer snarled. "I know your type. You think you can do whatever you want and get away with it. Not tonight." The accusation was sharp, baseless, and full of venom. But why did Officer Mitchell think Marcus was hiding something? Was it just because of the color of his skin? The officer started searching the car, tossing out Marcus's basketball gear, his backpack, everything. Papers and personal belongings scattered across the pavement, but Mitchell wasn't finding anything illegal. Because there wasn't anything. Marcus had nothing to hide. How could someone so innocent be treated like a criminal? How could this even be happening in a system meant to protect and serve? In the chaos, Marcus's phone had fallen to the ground, screen cracked but still lit up. And that's when Officer Mitchell made his biggest mistake. He didn't know who Marcus's mother was. Earlier that evening, Captain Denise Williams had just finished her shift. As one of the few black women serving as a police captain, Denise had spent her career fighting against the very biases that now threatened her son. She knew the weight of her badge, the power it held, and the dangers it presented when in the wrong hands. But what happens when the people in charge forget that their power is meant to protect, not oppress? Denise had always taught Marcus how to handle himself if he were ever stopped by the police. She'd warned him about the extra caution he'd need to take, the silent rules he'd have to follow that didn't apply to everyone else. As a mother and a captain, She had to prepare him for a world that might see him as a threat before it saw him as a person. But what happens when all the warnings, all the lessons, aren't enough? A sudden, anxious feeling swept over Denise. She checked her phone, noticing a missed call from Marcus. Her pulse quickened. Something wasn't right. She tried calling him back, but there was no answer. What would you do if you couldn't reach your child in a moment like this? Back on the street, Officer Mitchell was growing more aggressive, furious that he hadn't found anything to justify the arrest he'd already decided in his mind was necessary. Marcus was still on the ground, his wrists aching from the cuffs, his mind racing. What could he do? Who could he call? And then with one hand free, Marcus reached for his phone. He hit a single button, one he knew by heart. His mom's number. What happens when the person who can save you is the one no one expects? The phone rang once, twice. Then she answered. Mom. Marcus, where are you? Denise's voice was filled with concern but controlled. She knew better than to panic. I've been stopped. Arrested. Marcus managed, his voice barely a whisper. What goes through a mother's mind when she hears those words? How does she remain calm when her worst fear is unfolding? Denise's heart dropped, but she switched into captain mode. Stay calm. I'm on my way. How fast can a mother move when her child is in danger? And what happens when the system underestimates the strength of a parent's love? It didn't take long for Captain Denise Williams to arrive on the scene. She stepped out of her car, uniform and badge gleaming under the streetlights. Her presence was undeniable, commanding, and in that moment, it was the last thing Officer Mitchell expected. What does a racist cop do when he realizes the person he's wronged is connected to a force more powerful than his prejudice? Denise didn't rush, she didn't shout, she approached with the measured confidence of someone who had seen it all before. Because she had. What's going on here, Officer Mitchell? Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp, taking in every detail of the scene. Marcus, handcuffed and on the ground, his belongings scattered. The look of shock on Mitchell's face when he realized who she was. This is your son? Mitchell stammered, clearly caught off guard. Yes, Denise replied, her voice even. Now, would you like to explain why my son is in handcuffs? Mitchell stuttered through a half-baked explanation, his earlier bravado nowhere to be found. The tension was thick, the power dynamics shifting with every passing second. The same man who had been so quick to judge and arrest Marcus now looked panicked, unsure of how to proceed. What happens when a racist cop's actions are exposed in the harsh light of accountability? Does he feel regret, fear, or is he only worried about saving his own skin? Denise walked over to Marcus, helping him up with a quiet strength. She unlocked the cuffs with ease, her hands steady. You're okay now, she whispered to him, her eyes filled with the kind of love that can both heal and protect. How does a mother protect her child in a world that seems bent on tearing them down? But Denise wasn't done. She turned back to Officer Mitchell, her expression hardening. We'll be having a conversation about this with Internal Affairs. Mitchell's face went pale. He had overstepped, assuming his actions would never be questioned, assuming that Marcus was just another nameless black kid with no one to fight for him. What happens when the system is forced to confront its own corruption? Can one person's fight for justice ripple through the entire structure? In the end, Marcus was safe, but the scars of that night wouldn't fade so easily. The truth was clear. This wasn't just about one bad cop or one unjust arrest. It was about a system that allowed it to happen in the first place. A system that needed people like Denise to hold it accountable. But how many more mothers, how many more sons will have to endure this before real change happens? And what can we as a society do to ensure that justice is not just a privilege for some, but a right for all? Denise's eyes never left Officer Mitchell. The gravity of the moment weighed on both of them, though in very different ways. For Mitchell, it was the crushing realization that his unchecked authority had led him to this dangerous point, and for Denise, it was the battle she fought daily, fighting not just for her son, but for every victim of injustice who didn't have someone with her rank and power to step in. As she helped Marcus gather his scattered belongings, she couldn't help but think about the countless other mothers who weren't so fortunate, who would never get the chance to intervene in time. The truth was, This story wasn't unique. It happened every day, in every corner of the country, with far too many Marcus Williamses who didn't have someone like her in their corner. "Let's go, Marcus," she said quietly, ushering him into her car. As they drove away, the silence between them was heavy, not just with the fear of what could have happened, but with the knowledge that this wasn't over. How do you heal after an experience like this? How do you move forward when you realize you could have easily been just another name, another statistic? The next few weeks were difficult. Marcus had nightmares about that night, replaying it in his mind over and over again, each time questioning how different the outcome could have been. But his mother remained a pillar of strength. Denise filed a formal complaint with Internal Affairs, and the department launched an investigation into Officer Mitchell's history of stops and arrests, shining a light on the biases that had been allowed to fester for far too long. But what will it take to dismantle a system that protects the guilty and punishes the innocent? Will holding one officer accountable be enough to change anything? For Marcus, it was a sobering reminder of the realities he faced as a young black man in America. The future still stretched out before him, but the optimism he once held was now tinged with caution. A knowledge that the world saw him differently. He would have to walk through life with both eyes open, tied up, always alert, always prepared. But there was something powerful in knowing that his mother had his back, not just as a parent, but as a force for justice in a system designed to work against them. That at least gave him hope. How many more battles like this one would they have to fight before the world truly changed? And who else would step up to demand that change?
If you've watched this far, comment which country you're watching from and leave a 100 in the comment section because you are type of person that likes to finish what they started. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to get notified whenever we drop new videos.